This here is Maynard from down south in Tennessee, and my family came to this country on the Mayflower, so I embraced my British roots by listening to the Paranormal UK radio network. Boy, howdy, now I gotta go get me some pork rinds.
Through that handbook for the recently deceased, it says, live people ignore the strange and unusual. I myself am strange and unusual.
Coming to you on the Paranormal UK radio network.
It's a strange hobby. Curious. Wouldn't it be better if you put her someplace? I've caused you some trouble.
The first Thursday of every month at 8 p.m. GMT and EST and 5 p.m. PST.
Are you mad at me? How mad at me are you?
The female perspective on all things paranormal.
I'll buy a cup if you buy a box of my delicious Girl Scout cookies. Do we have a deal? Are they made from real Girl Scouts?
From the East Coast to the West Coast, across the pond and the world beyond.
Captain Howdy said no.
Captain who?
Captain Howdy.
Who's Captain Howdy?
You know, I make the questions and he does the answers.
Oh, Captain Howdy, yes.
Nice.
Oh.
Not a psychiatrist, she needs a priest. She's already seen every psychiatrist in the world, and they sent me to you. Now you're going to send me back to them? Help her, just help her.
What an excellent day for an exorcism.
It's time for ParaDivas.
They're here.
Definition of diva. To describe a person who exudes great style and personality with confidence and expresses their own style and not letting others influence who they are or want to be. A person whose character makes them stand out from the rest. A person who tries to achieve what they want and who do not let people get in their way, and doing so with style and class. We are ParaDivas. Thank you for tuning in to ParaDivas. Tonight is a very exciting evening. I'm very, very, very excited for this show tonight. We are debuting our new co-host, the new ParaDiva. I would like everyone to welcome Karai Cooper as our new co-host. Karai, welcome to ParaDivas.
Thank you, Marie. I'm happy to be here.
I am thrilled to have you. I am absolutely just overjoyed. I think you and I together are going to make a swell team.
I agree.
And I was thinking maybe you could take a minute to let the listeners know a little bit about you and your interest in the paranormal.
Sure, Marie. I am a Canadian creepy loner shut-in who basically spends all my time writing stories about talking animals. I have way too many pets. I spend a lot of time vacuuming up dog hair, too. And I read a lot, and my interest in the paranormal started probably when I was about 5 years old, and I lived in a 100-year-old farmhouse in rural Ontario, Canada. And there were lots of shadows and footsteps at night and whispers in your ear when you were sleeping, and it sort of stemmed from there.
And now you and I have been friends on Facebook for, 5 years probably?
I would say probably about that, when I started off listening to your Macabre Moments podcast and then basically stalked you until you gave me attention. And that was kind of how that went. And
now here we are today.
And here we are today.
The magic of Facebook, everyone.
Lesson, kids. Stalk your favorite star.
Right.
Just kidding. No, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that.
No, and she seriously wasn't stalking me.
I wasn't stalking her. I think I sent you a message saying, "Oh, I love your podcasts." Kind of. I think that was about it. I love your podcasts. Yes. You were like, "Awesome. Be my Facebook friend." I was like, "Sure."
And then from there, it was, just, us liking each other's posts, commenting on each other's posts, and quickly I came to realize that you and I were very much similar people with similar interests, and that's why I thought you would be a perfect fit for the show.
Oh, thank you. We are. Was it the Jack the Ripper tour I did, or was it the...
It's just everything.
Just kidding.
Like
I'm teasing.
Almost every post, I was just like, this girl gets me. You know what I mean? We have a little twisted sense of humor. I call you my twisted sister.
I think we are. I mean, I am into everything spooky and paranormal. It's not where I live, but I do enjoy it. I do enjoy it for sure.
Karai also is an author of a book that you have out.
I am. It's called The Stolen Herd. It is a fantasy story with animals and a wicked queen and an evil wizard. And so I think that fans of, I would say, probably Lord of the Rings or The Jungle Book, Harry Potter, anything like that would probably like it. It's available on Amazon and in paperback at your local chapters.
And that is called The Stolen Herd.
That's right, The Stolen Herd.
I recommend that everybody pick up a copy. Of course.
There's a ghost in it.
So, yes, she is an accomplished author as well. And we are just very pleased to have her on the show.
Well, thank you.
We will get to know a lot more of Karai as we go on with the ParaDivas. With each episode, we will get deeper and deeper into her brain. But for now, let's get on to tonight's guest. She is the author of the trilogy of House of Darkness, House of Light, and the hit movie The Conjuring is based on her family's experience with their true life haunting. We'd like to welcome Andrea Perron to the show. Andrea, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Welcome, Andrea.
It's my pleasure, ladies. Oh, my God. Our listeners don't know this, but we've been at this for a couple of months now trying to make this fly. And so I'm delighted that we finally got our connections made and all the I's dotted and T's crossed, and we are rolling.
I know it's been a long time coming. Like you said, it's been we've had a few trials and tribulations we've had to deal with, but here we are tonight. Finally, very excited to talk to you. And this is Karai's first chance to speak with you. I've had the pleasure to interview you a few times in the past over my little radio career, but. So, I figured we'd just start with, most people know your story from The Conjuring. If you could just give us kind of, a nutshell version of what happened with your family at the farmhouse.
Well, there's really no such thing because I spent 7 years to the exclusion of all else writing 3 books to the total of 1,500 pages, chronicling and detailing the events that happened in the house. So it would probably take me, the condensed form would probably be 3 to 4 hours. So, no, really.
No, I read the book. I read the books. I've actually got one. Yeah, I do. I love those books.
Thank you.
Can I say The Conjuring was a horror movie, and they wrote it. It was a commercial horror movie that made millions of dollars at the box office because it was a fantastic movie. What I liked about House of Darkness, House of Light trilogy, it was more of a spiritual journey. It was not a horror book. So for anybody who's listening, if you definitely pick up the books. The books are fantastic. I love them. But it wasn't so much a horror book. It was more of a family spiritual journey, living in this house, having an experience that is not the norm.
Exactly. You nailed it.
Yeah. And how it affected their lives, because these are formative years. These kids, they have 5 kids, 5 little girls, aged like from 5 to 15, I believe. April was 5 when you moved in?
Yes, and I was 12.
And you were, 12, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And those are formative years. So these girls, while they had this beautiful childhood in rural Rhode Island, I grew up the same way, rural area in a 100-year-old farmhouse, with their dad was away a lot of the time on the road, and with this beautiful, elegant mother. I mean, I'm so impressed with your mom. She's an ex-model, isn't she?
Yes.
Yeah, fashion model. And she's very intelligent. I'm a highly educated, intelligent woman, and just this lovely role model for these girls, and sort of like a queen and her princesses almost. And the books blew me away. They're beautiful books. They're beautiful stories.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. But the thing that kind of throws you is, all of a sudden something terrifying happens, like that one part where you guys are having a sleepover and your sister gets dragged down the hallway and down the stairs and into the pantry. I mean, so it's this beautiful, idyllic setting, this fairy tale upbringing with some really chilling moments. So it's unlike any book I've ever read. I just love it.
Well, the thing is about it is Conjuring was based on the case files of Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Yeah.
And even though James Wan and everybody associated with the film, including the screenwriters, and predominantly so, focused a great deal of their attention and affection on my books.
Yeah.
When it came time to amalgamate some of the true story into the film, and the screenwriters, Chad and Carrie Hayes, plucked things that they thought were exceptional to integrate into the film. The bosses at Warner Brothers and New Line Cinema said, go take that out or redact it. Take that out now. This will scare people right out of their seats. They will. What's the point in making a movie that no one sees to the end?
Yeah.
And they were shooting for a PG-13, which they didn't get. I was with James Wan when the rating came down, and he flipped. I mean, he had to be pulled off the ceiling of the Anaheim Convention Center. He was so upset. And, he told his producer or whoever he was dealing with from New Line, called them right back, the MPAA called them right back and asked them what I have to take out of this film to get a PG-13. And they answered immediately, nothing. There's nothing you can take out of the film to get a PG-13. It's just too scary. Yeah. And meanwhile, I'm standing there with my sister Cindy, who I had taken out to California with me, because Warner Brothers kindly and New Line Cinema arranged for Mrs. Warren and myself to get a sneak preview of the film 3 months before it premiered. And he was beside himself. And he's a very small man, and he's very sweet, and he's very demure. And I saw a whole nother side of him, because he's like, there's no gratuitous language, there's no sex, there's no extreme violence, there's nothing in this film that should keep it from, being seen by teenagers. And they disagreed. Whereas, I'm standing there looking at Cindy like, oh my God, if they actually ever saw the books on film, how would they deal with it?
Well, because there's some, I think I actually had dreams that night, like kind of just from some of the scenes reading in the book that were truly terrifying, that these poor little girls that was their life.
Yeah. Well, there were 5 of us. And, it was, we were 5 kids in 7 years, so Nancy and Christine are only 11 months apart. And 1 month a year, or like for 20 days a year, they're the same age.
Yeah.
And it's,
so the camaraderie
when I look
stronger.
back on it, when I look back on it, it was an extraordinary way to grow up. I mean, I have known since the tender age of 12 that there is something beyond our mortal existence.
Oh, yes.
But I'm 60 now, and I still can't tell you exactly what it is. But it is. And that's the freaking miracle.
Well,
that's what matters.
For me, it's not a question. I was raised in a very spiritual household. And so I have all kinds of crazy notions about what happens when we die. I mean, even the laws of thermodynamics tell us that we have 60 hertz of bioelectric energy that functions in our bodies. It runs our hearts, our brains, our central nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And the first law of thermodynamics is that energy can neither be created or destroyed, only transformed. So they say that that's the energy that carries on.
Yep.
So, I mean,
well, they've actually got a doctor and a team in Germany who is now obviously with permission, filming the death of people in hospice and actually filming the spirit leaving the body, as energy, as a form of energy. I mean, it's just amazing.
It is amazing, and it always makes me laugh when people say science versus spirituality. It's like no.
It's the same thing.
It's the same thing. Yeah, exactly.
Magic is science we don't understand. Period.
Right. That's right. And I mean, if they ever decide to not war and fight over religion and tap into that, could you imagine if we took all that energy that we pour into wars and fighting each other and hating each other and poured it into that, discovering how we can evolve spiritually, what we're supposed to be doing? Because for me, the meaning of life is you make the world a better place. I feel like that's why we're supposed to be here. And
right.
And then could you imagine if we took all that energy and focused it on
love,
connecting with the earth,
which is the only thing. It's the answer to every question. Love is the answer to every question. When you bring it down to its common denominator and you wipe away everything that is superfluous to whatever the question is, love is the only answer.
That's
why we're here.
That's exactly. And that's the magic that we have. That is our magic. Is that
it
love.
Is. Right. This morning, my dad and I were watching Smithsonian on TV. He's like addicted to the Smithsonian channel. And all of a sudden I heard Roger Williams in Rhode Island. I was up out of the man cave, out of my seat, and out in the parlor in a split second. Because they were doing flying over Rhode Island and over Massachusetts. And then they started going into the history and so on and so forth. And the farmhouse was built by Quakers. Now, the Quakers followed Roger Williams out of the Massachusetts Bay Colony when he was banished for his provocative and, what some considered blasphemous ideas about religion. And he founded the colony of Rhode Island on two principles: the separation of church and state and freedom to worship in any way that you choose. And so those that were not in line with the Puritans that had come over to find some religious freedom in the New World decided to follow him down, and they're the actual founders of the colony of Rhode Island, which later became the state of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations. And our farm was one of the plantations, because the way that Roger Williams was able to establish boundaries for the colony, with Connecticut encroaching from the west and the Massachusetts Bay Colony encroaching from the north and east, was to parse out huge, vast tracts of land in what became the smallest state in the Union with the largest name. And he had originally deeded to the Richardson family, which then became the Arnold family when it became the Arnold estate, thousands of acres of land, and that homestead was at the center of it. And the Quakers, who were the separatists from the Puritans and followed him and established themselves in the colony of Rhode Island. They are one of the most progressive, most forward-thinking of all religious sects in the world. I mean, back in the 16 and 1700s, women were completely, totally equal to their male counterparts. And they did not believe that you needed a priest or that you needed a minister or a reverend of any kind, an intermediary to be in touch with God, because their belief was that each and every single one of us is God consciousness in action, that we are each an expression of source energy, and that God's light is within us.
These are the Quakers?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And the reason that they came up with the name Quakers is because when they would gather, they would sit in silence and meditate until they raised their frequency to such an extent that their bodies would literally start to tremble.
No.
That's where the name comes from. Yep.
Wow.
Yep. Pretty cool, huh? And I grew up in a house that they built. And it was part of the Underground Railroad because they did everything that they could to get as many slaves up and out of this crazy country as they possibly could.
Wow. I've got goosebumps.
That's crazy. I eat their porridge. I'm connected. No, I'm just kidding. Quaker porridge.
I think we call it oatmeal in the U.S., but I eat it too every day.
Porridge just went to a whole new level for me.
Yep.
That's incredible. So do you think that there's a connection to... So then there's some serious energy in that house if it was built by these people. So there's already some kind of energy. I don't know what they call it, a vortex. I don't know what they call it. But there's already some kind of energy there. So now, back to the house. Because I could go on and on about this all day, but I know we're supposed to focus on the haunting.
We can focus on anything and everything that we want because everything is one thing.
Yep. Well, it is, right? Like this makes... Because when you have an extreme, for lack of a better term, extreme haunting like this, to me, it's not a residual spirit.
No, it was not residual energy.
Right?
Well, like maybe to some extent.
I think some were, because I think sometimes it will trap other energy there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But this was something that this energy was not human. It to me, from what I've read in your book.
Some of it was not. And unfortunately, and may she rest in peace, Lorraine Warren did everything in her power to help us. But she admitted to me that she and Ed were in over their heads the minute they stepped over the threshold. When I spoke with her at length in Hollywood 40 years after the last time I had seen her, not only did she recognize myself and my sister Cindy, but she apologized because they didn't mean to make matters worse, but they did. They stirred up the energy in that house, and my mother almost paid with her life for a seance that they foisted upon my parents that my father didn't want to have any part of. And it got very badly out of control almost immediately, and my mother was infiltrated by something that was not of this world, that spoke a language that does not exist on this planet, and it lifted her up in a 30-pound chair, suspended her in the air, and then in a fraction of a second tossed her and the chair, her in it, into the middle of our parlor, and everybody in the house heard her head strike that floor, and everybody that was present in that house thought we had just seen her die.
And you
That's
saw
how
it.
bad it got.
You were hiding on the stairs, weren't you? Yeah.
Yep, I was 15 when it happened. Yep.
And didn't your dad punch Ed Warren out?
Yeah, he did. He punched him right in the face and took him to the floor because Ed tried to stop my father from running to my mother. Oh. And that was a very big mistake on his part. And Ed was a big man, but my father turned around and cold-cocked him.
Well, that was his wife. That was his home. That was his,
And she was in need of help, obviously.
Yeah. That was his wife. Yeah.
Yes.
And we're sorry to hear about Lorraine's passing. That was, she's... I think she probably I'm sure her intentions were good. She seemed like a nice lady.
Yes, her intentions were good.
You know,
they had just never encountered anything like what they encountered in our house before.
Well,
and they never did again.
No.
She told me. She said that Ed's last wishes were that she would find a way to get our story told on film. He said he described verbatim. He described what they encountered in our home to be the most intense, compelling, disturbing, and significant of all of the investigations they ever conducted over a 40-year career as paranormal investigators.
What do you think was there?
I don't know. And if I did, I would tell you. But it's not fair for me to make any presumptions. It's not fair. I don't know if any of us will ever know, and not while we're in this realm. And I don't necessarily think that we're supposed to know. I think that we're supposed to seek and search and learn and grow and spiritually evolve. And that is what happened to every single one of us in one way or another. We each reacted to what we experienced in that house in a different way. But the end result was that all of us have lived our lives knowing that death is not the end. It's merely the beginning of our next story, which is what exactly saved me when my sister died.
Right.
When my baby sister died, I knew that she would come to me, and she did. She came to all of us. And so she's not really gone.
No.
No.
I believe that wholeheartedly.
Had I not grown up in the environment that I did, experiencing what I did, I don't know if I would have even been able to make that contact with her. I don't know. I feel so terrible for people who don't believe in an afterlife, because they close and wall themselves off to the experiences that could be happening all around them, and they're just not cognizant of them.
Yeah.
You know, all of us are surrounded by spirit all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. Yeah. And, all we have to do is learn how to see it, learn how to experience it, learn how to interact with the fourth dimension.
Yes. Learn how to feel it.
Yeah.
Learn how to recognize it.
Precisely.
But that's not always great if you're surrounded by spirits that do not have good intentions.
But we're also earthbound. One thing I do know is that we are earthbound spirit ourselves. And because of that, we are grounded. And because of that, we are stronger than anything in the ether. Anything.
Amen.
Yeah. But the house had some scary spirits in it. Was what I was my segue into. Like some of these moments in the book were very scary. Can you tell us about any of those?
Well, there were a number of incidents that were actually life-threatening. The one that I've already described with the seance, I didn't go into, great depth with that, but it was probably the most extreme of all the incidents that occurred. There was also an incident with my sister Christine getting caught in a trunk.
Yeah.
Literally lifted, picked up off the bed, put into a semi-state of sleep or incapacitation. And the spirit that lifted her off the bed through my mother's voice. Christine thought my mother is the one that put her into the antique trunk and then locked her in it. But there was no lock on the trunk, but she couldn't get out of it.
Yeah,
and she almost suffocated. And the same thing happened to Cindy out in the wood box. Again, a box that had no latch, no key, no way that it would have not opened immediately. And yet she could not get out, and she almost suffocated and hyperventilated. And it was a very, very bad scene. I was there for both of them. I saw the shape that my sisters were both in. Cindy being attacked by the thing that was hovering over me up in my bedroom and then dragged down. The only thing that saved her from being dragged all the way down the stairs was that she had the presence of mind to wrap her arm around the post at the side of the stairwell.
The banister,
and that's the banister. And that's what saved her. But I had no idea what was going on. It was not sleep, because you can wake somebody up from sleeping if you're screaming. And Cindy was screaming, and nobody woke up in the house. So she was in an altered state, and she was in a different dimension when it was happening.
Oh. See, that was your life growing up.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It was hard because, we were a perfectly normal family until we were a perfectly paranormal family. And it was, or as, people like to say, a paranormal family.
The paranormal family.
Yeah. And it was hard because, in the morning we'd have to get up and we'd have to go to school no matter what happened the night before, no matter how little sleep we were functioning on. It was tough. I mean, as soon as we moved in the house, like literally within minutes of starting to unload the truck.
That's when you saw Manny.
Yeah, that's when I saw my first full body apparition, but I didn't know it was a ghost. I did not. He looked perfectly normal to me, except that he was dressed funny. But other than that, he looked totally solid, and he was standing in the corner of the dining room watching Mr. Kenyon pack the last of his belongings out of the china cabinet and staring at him, just like watching him. He had his arms folded. He had kind of a quirky grin on his face. And when I walked past him, I greeted Mr. Kenyon. We chatted for a moment, and then I went into the kitchen with the box that I had from my mom, and April was in there with her because she was only 5. She was a little bitty thing. And so the rest of us were big enough and strong enough to take something off the truck, but it was way too cold for April to be outside. She couldn't be of any help outside. So Mom kept her with her. And I walked into the kitchen and I'm like, Mom, who's the man with Mr. Kenyon? And she said, there's nobody with Mr. Kenyon. His son's on the way, but he's not here yet. And, so I was like, okay. And I walked out the kitchen door and went back around to the truck. And meanwhile, Christine came through and asked my mom basically the same question. And then my sister Cindy came in with her box. She saw him too. And then Nancy came in and she saw him in a translucent kind of a fading out state. She leaned over to Cindy and she said, did you see that man with Mr. Kenyon? I did, but he just disappeared. And that was our entrance into the paranormal world.
Like, you're still bringing boxes into the house. You haven't even moved it.
Right.
And
then he appeared later. After he disappeared, he came back. And the thing that was so interesting about that is that when he came back, my father was in the dining room talking to Mr. Kenyon, and he reappeared, and the 4 of us were standing in there too, and all 4 of us, the children, saw him, and my father and Mr. Kenyon did not.
But didn't Mr. Kenyon tell your father to keep the lights on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. That afternoon, that evening, just around dusk, they went for a walk, and that's when Mr. Kenyon said, for the sake of your family, leave the lights on at night. And that didn't register with Dad. He didn't know how to interpret that. Ghosts weren't on the radar. You know what I mean? They just weren't.
No.
And so
he had trouble accepting it, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah. He had a great deal of trouble accepting it, and it caused a tremendous rift between him and my mom.
Yeah, because it was all happening to you.
My mother had a lot of really nasty disagreements about what was happening in the house. And he, admitted many years later, decades later, that he couldn't accept it because it scared him, because he couldn't imagine having moved his family into a house that he had no control over the environment, that he had no...
He couldn't fix it either.
No, he couldn't fix it.
And that would make him feel powerless.
Easier to deny it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That must have been so hard on your mom.
It was terrible. Well, it created a chasm between them that never really healed.
No.
Because, she'd rather swallow her own tongue than lie to anybody, and he knew that. Yeah. And they had already been married for 14 years. So the way she thought about it is, if he doesn't know me by now, then he never did and he never will. And she, emotionally began to pull away from him. And the more she pulled away from him, the more activity was created in the house because of the animosity between them. And it was stirring up that negative energy, and it was stirring up all kinds of activity in the house. And it just got to the point where that's what left her so vulnerable to the oppression which occurred.
Yes, and she was heavily oppressed, wasn't she, to the point where her personality started changing, as far as I remember from the books. And there was a time where she spent a lot of time digging bottles. Antique bottles were all over your property?
Yeah, there were a lot of really ancient dumps on the property. There were several. And from them, she got some of the most beautiful antiques that I have ever seen, and we're still in possession of many of them.
Wow.
She sold some, the ones that were most valuable, and it broke her heart to do it. But, people ask us, the question that I always get the most is, why did you stay? Well, the cosmic forces that seemed to conspire to get our family into that house likewise conspired to keep us in that house. And it wasn't long after we moved in that, my mother called our attorney, Sam. She's like, get me out of here. There's got to be something on the books. There's got to be some way to null and void this sale. I cannot raise my children in an environment like this. And he did everything in his power. And, the judge was just basically like, get out. I'm not passing judgment on something I can't see. And so that was it. And then, of course, the economy collapsed. It was the early 70s. And then right from that, we went into the complete turmoil of Watergate, and housing prices were dropping. Oil prices were spiking. It became more and more expensive daily to maintain that property. My father was working like a dog. He had his own jewelry business, and he would load his trunk up with goods and his car up with goods, and he had clients all the way from Ohio to Quebec to Florida. So he was on the road a lot. And the last thing, after working 2-3 weeks straight and driving endless miles on his own, the last thing he wanted to do was come home and hear about all the terrible stuff that happened while he was gone.
Yeah. Yeah, but getting to your father, he wasn't totally off the hook there. He would go down into the basement, and there would be someone whispering in his ear and caressing him, would there not?
Yeah, there was a spirit in the house, and, we don't know if it was Bathsheba. We don't know if it was Mrs. Arnold. We don't know who it was. That house was completed as it stands now in 1736. The land for it was deeded in 1680. The land grant was, that it was surveyed by John Smith, like the John Smith of Pocahontas fame.
Oh, wow.
And that was deeded to the Richardson family, which later, through marriage, it became the Arnold estate. And what was very interesting is that my sister was dating Eddie Richardson, who was a direct descendant of the people who built that house. And every time Eddie walked into that house, all hell broke loose. He was like, I know, it's how it is. It's just, he was like totally chill about it. It was really amazing. When you think of the cycles and the circles and who's to say that we're not just recycled souls? I had my most compelling experience in the house was when I was 17. Excuse me just a second. Let me get a a drink of coffee here. It's allergy season in Florida. So I have a perpetual tickle in my throat. I had come home from college, and I'd only been out there for like about a month out in Pittsburgh, and I was absolutely miserable. I had the roommate from hell, and it was, I just couldn't wait to get home, and Dad flew me home for my birthday, which was October 10th, and it fell on Columbus Day weekend, so I could spend 3 days at home. And oh God, did I need to see my family? Did I need to get back to that farm? It was an emotional imperative for me. And I was standing in front of I'd already taken my stuff up to my room. That's when I discovered that Cindy had taken my room. And so apparently I now had a roommate, but we always kind of did anyway, because there was really not many times that I woke up in my bed alone in the morning. Somebody always found their way to me during the night if they heard something or got scared. So anyway, I had put my stuff upstairs and I'd come down, and I was cold. And in that time I had, I guess not forgotten, but had dissociated from the concept of supernatural cold, because it is quite different from natural cold. And I just was frozen, and I was standing in front of the fireplace, and Mom had made a nice dinner. Everybody was at the dining room table. There was a big, huge opening between the parlor and the dining room, so I could see everybody in my family. And I told Mom that I would be right there. I just wanted to warm up, and I backed up against the fire on the hearthstone, and my last conscious thought was, I'm standing too close to the fire. I had corduroys on. And I said, why am I so cold? Why can't I get warm? And just then my father dropped his fork on his plate, and I looked up, and he was staring at me, but he was actually staring to my right, to his left of me. And I turned my head. That's all I could move was my head. And I turned my head, and there was a woman standing beside me, facing me, so they could only see her profile. And she was in a full-length dress with leg of mutton leaves and pearl sleeves and a high bodice and lace around the neckline. And her hair, her massive hair, was all up in a bun on the top of her head. And I was staring into the face of a mirror image reflection of myself as an older woman.
Whoa.
And I said, oh, no. I didn't even say it aloud, but, and then she disappeared. But the whole side of my body was like a slab of ice. But she smiled at me, and it was like, oh, God, I'm going to have to come back here again. Oh, my God. I've been here before. I didn't even tell my mother.
Well, theoretical physicists now speak freely about parallel universes. I wonder if that's maybe... They say these entities intrude into our world from time to time, and they're from a universe that may be a mirror image to our own. So I don't know. Or maybe, who knows? That house did weird things, though. Like, it was that place. Like,
yeah.
What do you think it was?
I describe it as a portal cleverly disguised as a farmhouse.
Yeah.
Yep, it was a place where it could be 1976 one minute and 1876 the next and 1776 the next. That house was 40 years old when the Declaration of Independence was signed.
You mentioned that and I was going to ask you this. Do you feel that the spirits brought your family to that property?
Yes.
And why do you think
I do.
They chose your family?
I don't know.
Well,
I wish I did. That would be a great answer to give you.
Yeah.
I don't know. All I know is that it was more a calling than anything else. It was beyond a calling. It was compulsory. I mean, my mother was supposed to find the farm. We were supposed to live at the farm. We could not leave the farm, and we had to stay there for a decade until we learned our lessons. And then 30 years later, I had to tell the story.
What were the residuals? Like, how was it after you left? I know when you moved into your new place, didn't a door fall on your mom at your new house?
Oh, yeah. It
like
was really bad. It was, we'd been there for at least a couple of months. We moved in June of 1980, not long after I graduated from college. And Cindy and our family friend Harry had taken the horses down and were getting the house ready to receive us. So when we moved down, it was kind of like caravan style. And when we moved down later in June, when we pulled up in front of the house, when we left the house in Rhode Island, Nancy refused to go. She stayed on as the caretaker of the property for the new owners. She refused to leave the farm. She never forgave my parents for selling that house. And when we were pulling out of the driveway, there was an apparition standing right behind her on the front porch. And it was the same apparition that was standing behind Cindy in Georgia when we arrived at that farm. The same woman. And we don't know who it was. But my mother, bless her heart, my mother burst into tears. And she said, "This isn't over. This will never be over."
Oh.
Well, but, look at where you're at now, right? I'm thinking that all of this is happened to at least have you where you are now, spreading the word, for lack of a better description. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Spreading awareness.
Yes. Thank you.
Because you're creating a home for other people that this has happened to, because there are many. Like, you can read books filled true hauntings, podcasts, Paranormal Survivor, The Haunted, all these people that these things have happened to, and they all kind of have the same story. The same symptoms, for lack of a better word, these experiences have. And so you kind of think, well, there's continuity here. Like, are people just, which makes me, like, that's not just being made up. But this is happening to people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think,
and now because of people like us that have come forward, it gives others credibility, so that they can share their story as well and not be so fear-based about doing so.
And credibility, but not only credibility, but understanding and support. Like, wow, this has happened to you too, right? It's like, it's terrifying. And the brain doesn't know real from the imaginary in the sense of anxiety, so it will give you anxiety and the things that go along with it. Right? Like did you have a lot of that when you left the house? I think that, no?
No, we didn't. It was more a sense of, for my mother, until she had her altercation in the new house, it was a sense of relief more than anything else, and for Cindy as well, because both of them had been attacked several times in that house. So it was really more a sense of relief. But, and now consider that in 1980, it was well before the age of Google. And we don't know how Mrs. Warren, who the last time we saw the Warrens was the night of the seance when my father threw them out of the house. and it was a very, very ugly scene. They came back once, hat in hand, not long after, when they made sure Dad wasn't home so that they could check and make sure that Mom was okay, because they did not know if she was going to survive when they left the house that night. So it was, to their credit, they came back to check on her and to, see if everything was okay. But my mother didn't let them in the house that night. And that was the last time that we saw them. But in 1980, when we moved to Georgia, sometime in August of that first summer that we were down there, Mrs. Warren called the house. And my mother, remember back the old landline phones, the princess phones and stuff like that. I mean, it's kind of funny now. It sounds like light years ago, but it really wasn't. And my mother answered the phone, and she covered the receiver. She's like, "It's Mrs. Warren." I'm like, "Oh no." And she had a quote unquote ghostwriter with her, trying to convince my mother to let them write a book and make a movie about our experiences. And my mother shot her down immediately. And Mrs. Warren, offered her a boatload of money and said, "At the very least, you have to discuss this with your husband. It's only fair. I mean, this could, financially change your family for good, And so she very reluctantly agreed to discuss it with Dad. But when Dad got home, he's like, "Okay, girls, come on, we're all going out." And Mom's like, "No, I have laundry to do. I'm going to stay home and do the laundry, take the girls out and go out and have dinner," or whatever we went to do. And while she was alone in the house, she went down into the cellar where the washer and dryer were on the lower level of the house. And to get some of the larger antiques into the house, my father had removed one of the doors between their master bedroom suite and then out into the hallway, and then the laundry room was off to the side. And he had propped it up against the back wall of the laundry room and secured it there because it was heavy and it was dangerous. And as she was leaning over to put laundry into the washing machine, that door slammed down on top of her. It gave her a concussion. It dislocated her shoulder. It could have broken her back. It snapped one of her ribs, or at least bruised it. I mean, it was just awful.
Jeez.
Her head hit the agitator in the washing machine, and it hit her with all the power that the universe could muster. And that was her warning as far as she was concerned. That was her warning not to do anything about telling the story of the farmhouse with Mrs. Warren.
Well, she also fell the day you guys visited the set, didn't she?
No, my mother didn't come to the set.
No, something bad happened
to her.
The day that
Right,
you guys
yes,
went.
she did. She fell, right. She didn't fall on the set. She didn't come with us.
She didn't come.
As she reneged at the very last minute and insisted that she would be fine staying home alone. And meanwhile, I had been up in Michigan. I converged from Michigan down to North Carolina. My father and my sister Nancy came up from Florida, and everybody else drove in from the Atlanta area. So we all basically arrived at the same time, and Mom was home alone. And while she was, somebody came to the door, and she went to answer it, and my Christine's dog, Libby, kind of bumped up against her, and she ended up down on the floor. But when she woke up at the hospital the next day, she said, I have not felt a presence like that in more than 30 years. So, I mean, she'll say now it had to have been Libby, but at the time she said she had been pushed, and she felt like she'd been shoved to the floor, and she, just couldn't. I mean, Libby bumped up against all of us all the time. She was just a big fat dog.
Yeah,
and,
I have a big fat dog, so I get that.
Yeah, but not enough to have, literally shoved my mother to the floor and snapped her hip off.
Whoa.
So she actually suffered a broken hip from the fall?
Yeah, yes.
Oh my God.
Yep. And thank God, as she's laying on the floor writhing in pain, thank God that my niece, who knew she was home alone, came over to ask her grandmother if she would like to have dinner with her, and she's the one that found her and got her to the hospital as fast as possible. Meanwhile, the rest of us are on a set in North Carolina with all of our phones turned off. So she's trying desperately to reach any of us to get a message to us that Grandma has been hurt and is in the hospital, and we're granting an interview to on the movie set for The Conjuring, and it wasn't until hours later that we discovered that she had been so desperately injured they didn't even know if she would survive the night. She was having a great deal of trouble breathing. They didn't know if she would survive the anesthesia. They had to stabilize her before they could do the surgery the following day. And so we were supposed to stay on the set for 2 full days, and we had to leave. We all drove back to Atlanta, and all 5 of her daughters walked into her hospital room at the same time, and that's when she having come just out of surgery, sat bolt upright in her bed, still completely sedated, and looked at me and took my hand and said, I have not felt that presence in more than 30 years. And then she laid back down and went to sleep and didn't wake up till the next day.
Do you think that it was the entity that compelled her to stay at the last minute and not go?
I don't know. I feel like there's, I think that it's all interrelated in some way. It was very strange because, Lily Taylor, who played her in the film, at the very last minute decided not to come to the set that day. So both of the matriarchs from The Conjuring and from the real-life Perron family were in absentia on that day when everybody else associated with that film came to the set to meet us, and she didn't.
That is...
And, yeah, I didn't meet her until we were in Hollywood.
For the premiere?
Yes. Yep. And then I spent most of the evening with her. Vera Farmiga stayed with Mrs. Warren, and Lily Taylor stayed with me.
Wow. What did you think of the Warrens when they came? How did they come to the farmhouse in the first place? How did they get involved?
We don't know exactly, because it wasn't like, there's virtually nothing in the film that's an accurate portrayal of what actually happened. And because you've read the books, you know that.
Yeah, that's right.
But during August of 1973, my father was getting ready to go out on another road trip, and a van load of young people pulled into our yard. And at first, my mother and father thought they might have been friends of mine from school. But, my mom's said to my father, go find out what's going on. Who are these people and what's going on here? And he's like, you know what? I got to hit the road. You guys are on your own here. You handle it. But just assuming they were friends from school or something. And we were all home. So, he wasn't leaving her alone per se. But Keith Johnson got out of the van, and his brother Carl and their whole group of paranormal investigators. And he said that my mother called him and asked them to come to the house. And my mother said, no, I didn't. I never called anybody. I never talked about this with anybody. The only one of my friends that even knew about it was Kathy at that time, and maybe her friend Barbara Shaw. And that was it that she had discussed with anybody about what was going on in the house. She said, I never called, what's a paranormal investigator? She's like, what's going on here? But Keith said somebody called him claiming to be Carolyn Perron and asked him to come to their house. to our house. And they had such intense experiences there that day, Keith in particular, that he is the one that sought out Mr. and Mrs. Warren and told them about our predicament and told them where we lived. And they didn't come, and that was like a couple of weeks later, but they didn't come until the night before Christmas, but night before Halloween. And Mrs. Warren said it was because that's when the veil is thinnest, and they had the best chance of having some kind of activity, seeing, witnessing something in the house. And my mother thought that was the most ridiculous thing that she ever heard. She's like, what veil are you talking about? There's no veil here. It's literally, there's, no line of demarcation or, no scrim that gets lowered and raised. No. And that was one of the things that, Mrs. Warren found so compelling, was that she knew just from the energies swirling in the house that, there was something major going on there. And even though Bathsheba Sherman never lived in that house, she had some attachment to it. And she was actually from the adjacent farm, the Sherman farm. She married Judson Sherman as a very young woman, probably 16 or 17, which is not, unrealistic considering life expectancy at the time was 40 to 45.
Yeah.
So she had an attachment to the house and knew the family that was there. And she... when Mrs. Warren walked in the house, she walked over to our big black cast iron stove in the kitchen and placed her hand on the corner of it and covered her eyes. And the first thing she said was, I sense a malignant presence in this house. Her name is Bathsheba. Well, she had no idea of the history of the house. My mother was just learning about the history of the house and the area. And the only Bathsheba that she knew of was Bathsheba Sherman that lived, as the crow flies, like maybe a mile away at the Sherman farm. But there was also Mr. McEachern, who was the town historian. He was in his late 90s, or early 90s, I guess, when we met him. He knew Bathsheba Sherman. She died when he was 10 years old. She died in 1885. And he didn't have a kind word to say about her. Said she was just an absolutely vicious woman who was brutal to her farmhands, would beat them, would starve them, that she was just a horrific person. And every time he spoke about her to my mother, he would lower his eyes. And so he's the one that told her that she had been, if not accused or charged, an inquest had taken place because apparently when she was young, she was babysitting over at the Arnold estate, and a baby died in her care. And when the doctor retrieved the body and did what was, I guess, an autopsy for that time, discovered that there was a sewing needle impaled at the base of the infant's skull, and he listed the cause of death as convulsions. So there was naturally an inquest, and they didn't find any evidence that Bathsheba had done anything deliberately to hurt the baby. So she walked away scot-free, but in the court of public opinion, she was tried and convicted and lived a miserable life under that shadow of doubt and blame her whole life. And she had a very hard life herself. She had 4 children with Judson Sherman, and only one of them lived to adulthood. Her other 3 children died before the age of 4. They're all buried next to her in the Riverside Cemetery in Harrisville.
Oh. Do you know the cause of death of the 3 children?
No. No, I don't.
And was she as nasty of a... Did she have such a nasty disposition before the accusation, or did that
I don't know.
She would have been like 12 or something. But how old was she when she was babysitting?
She was in her, we suspect based on the timeline that she was in her late teens.
Wow.
It could have been her baby, for all we know. We don't know.
Yeah,
the history, it was spotty at best. I mean, my mother had to go all the way to Worcester, Massachusetts to find anything about the inquest. And she had she had Xerox. That's a word that'll blast you back into the past, huh? She had Xeroxed all of the birth certificates and death certificates and, trying to come up with what history she could on the house. And she had compiled all of that into a notebook, which included sketches and descriptions of all of the apparitions that she had seen in the house, detailed accounts of incidents that had occurred. And when the Warrens came in 1973, and so many of these things had happened, prior to their arrival. And Mrs. Warren looked through the notebook and was blown away by the history that my mother had compiled on the house. And I think it was on her third or fourth visit that she asked my mother if she could borrow the notebook and make copies of everything in it. And my mother very reluctantly handed it over to her with the understanding that as soon as that process was done, that the notebook would return to her. And I am very sad to say that notebook and everything in it was sold to a movie company as part of the case files for the Warrens. And we will never see it again.
Oh, too bad.
Yes, it is very sad. And really a blight on their reputation. And I, God forbid, speak ill of the dead. I don't speak ill of her. And the reason that I don't is I do believe that she removed that from the house because she considered it to be a haunted item or an item that held a great deal of energy, that was negative energy, and she did not want it where we were. But Mrs. Warren also had a proclivity for claiming things from different locations she investigated as her own, and hence the museum exists. I have been told by a number of people that have visited the museum over the years that a series of items that disappeared from our house over the course of their visitations were under glass in that museum.
Oh. So she had a memento fetish.
Yes, she did.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's
I wonder if she... Yeah, I wonder if she had some reasoning behind it. She thought energy was attached to that item or thought she thought that, or who knows.
Yeah.
Can never know why people do the things they do.
They do, yeah.
That they do, people do crazy things. So over the course of 4 or 5 visits, and then which culminated in a rather tragic seance, like a terrifying seance that sort of left, even you said at one point in the book that even left the spirits in the house were quiet after that because...
Yeah, I think it even scared them.
Like something touched down. Can you tell us?
Yeah, it was. Well, as I had expressed earlier, it was not of this world.
Yeah.
It is what it is. I mean, they brought a medium with them named Mary Pastorella. And
okay. She did. Okay, I've heard her.
The Conjuring. She's the one that Conjuring, and invited, through open wide the doors to the netherworld, and said, "Come on in," so that they could determine who the culprit was that was causing a problem. I mean, it was nothing short of spiritual malpractice.
Yeah. I have read in multiple books that you should never have a seance and never use a Ouija board.
Yeah.
So
well, Mrs. Warren later in life changed her mind about that. I've got, some film footage and photographs of her doing Ouija sessions that apparently were not problematic, but informative. The way I feel about it is a Ouija board is cardboard and plastic. It doesn't have its own inherent energy. If we want to connect with the netherworld, we could focus the same kind of energy that we focus in groups on a Ouija board and do it on a peeled orange and get the same result, because it's not the thing, it's the energy and the connectivity that goes into it that creates that the integration, as it were. But so that's my opinion. I don't think of them as, necessarily or inherently evil or good. They're plastic and cardboard.
They're a conduit. They're just a conduit to something that you...
And anything could be that you put your energy and attention into.
Well, yeah, because you can make one out of a glass and a bunch of paper scraps. So it's...
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it really boils down to the intention of what the person's intention is, what their disposition is while they're practicing or using the Ouija board.
Yeah, exactly.
So now that you grew up in having these experiences, I have read that people say it opens them up to other experiences like that. Have you had any other experiences since you left the house?
Too numerous to count.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it is, and you both of you well know that once you open that door, you can't close it again. Once you're touched by spirit, it becomes a permanent part of your life. You can't unlearn it, unthink it, unknow it, unfeel it. It just is. Mm-hmm. And so I accepted that long ago. And and I'm perfectly fine with it. I don't have anything negative come anywhere near me. It doesn't dare. I choose to live in the light. It is exactly what my life was supposed to be, and now I share what I perceive to be as a gift with anyone and everyone who's interested in hearing what I have to say.
And I honestly think that's why your family was chosen to, live in the farmhouse in the first place. This was all the plan.
Yeah. Yep, it was. And I was supposed to tell their story. And I did it to the best of my ability with as much heart as I could put into it. It was a very difficult thing to write that trilogy. I sacrificed 7 years of the prime of my life to do it. I mean, literally to the exclusion of all else. And, no relationship, no nothing. I just worked on the books, and then worked on the books some more. So it just is what it is. I finally got through it. I can't tell you how relieved I was the day that it was done. And interestingly, I started writing the books. I started this project, House of Darkness, House of Light, before it had a title, before it had a trajectory, before it was anything other than a series of recollections handwritten on index card and put in a recipe box. And I started that process on August 7th, 2007. And 7 years to the day, August 7th, 2014, is when the last book was published. And I had submitted all of my work months earlier to the publisher. I had no control over what day it would actually be published. And I happened to be on the phone with my friend George Lopez when I got the email notification that the third book had gone live. And I looked at the date on the computer and I was like, you know what, George, wait a minute. something's ringing a bell with this date in my head. And I went back with the phone in my hand. I took it back into my room and I opened up the chest at the bottom of my bed, because I am a notorious keeper of things, and including calendars. And I went back to 2007 when I had started the project. And on August 7th, it said, "And so it begins."
Wow.
Oh, my. And I mean, and these are not little books. I mean, volume 2 is 475 pages, wasn't it? Like,
yeah, I think it's a little, just short of 500. Volume 1 is 550. And it's like 1,500 pages total, the whole thing. I mean, it's a huge investment of time and energy.
Well, yeah, I write
these books.
I write books, and yeah, like that's my book's 194 pages. So, I get it. It's like a lot of work, and there's a lot of research. Like there's been a lot of research gone into these books, because there's a lot of like uplifting quotes and things that go along with it. They're an art piece, so sort of the vision that you've had for your story, and it's fantastic. I really liked it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I find most people really do love it. If they're attracted to it, it's like it speaks to them. And, but I've had my detractors too. I mean, because they're right after the movie opened, people bought the book thinking that they were going to basically be rereading the movie, which was a piece of fiction.
Yeah.
And when they got into the nonfiction and my take on things, I got several really horrible reviews after the movie opened because, this is the worst book I ever read. There's nothing scary in here, blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, go read some fiction, okay? Because this is my intimate family memoir told the way that I wanted to tell it. And if you want to do better, go write your own book. Because, I opened a vein to do this. And those that resonate with it, those that, kind of up on my same wavelength and frequency, they get it. They understand that, poetry was a part of our lives. Music was a part of our lives. What I did was I integrated every single element of all of our experiences that any of us could remember in the best detail that anyone could muster and put it all together. And it does not follow strictly chronologically. What I ask my reader to do is to suspend all notion of linear time. When you start the book, it is chronological. It introduces you to my family in volume 1 as a perfectly normal family, and then they get to see that transition into becoming, paranormally touched by spirit. And it ends chronologically. But in the middle, I just basically ask people to just understand if it's in the book and you're reading it, it happened during the 10 years that we were there. Because I broke it. There were so many stories and there were so many different elements of the story that I broke it down chapter by chapter into the kind of occurrence, the type of haunting that it was. And so I, tried to help people in terms of their linear understanding by saying, Cindy was 12 when this happened, but then the very next story could be something that happened to Cindy when she was 16. And for people who are just hardwired into linear thinking, that throws them. They feel like they've just missed 4 years. Well, no, you haven't. Let me ask you as the author to, as the reader, suspend that notion of time and ask yourself why these two stories are side by side. What is the correlation between the two? Why did this, happen to Cindy when she was 12 and then this event happened to Cindy when she was 16? Why? And so in that respect, I try to help elevate the discourse and lift people up out of 3D, 5-sensory realm so that they too can experience what it was like to live interdimensionally and in a way that time was irrelevant.
I feel bad I feel bad for those people because I really love that book. And you learned a lot about the family that wasn't in the movie. Like, you had a dog named Bathsheba, didn't you, before you moved there?
Before
like, there was
we even moved there.
You know, like there's all these little tiny details that are really interesting that I really liked. It expanded, the story.
Well, Volume 2 is very much deeper and darker than Volume 1. And according to my readers, Volume 3 will rip your heart out of your body and then hand it back to you healed, and you don't understand how that happened.
Yeah, like I said, I really enjoyed them. And there were some things that happened in the movie that were in the books. Like it would come and scare you at night in your bed, and
and there were some very strange little quirky things that happened in the movie that I had no control over and I did not know about. And the set designer, Julie, the thing that I thought was strangest of all was when I was watching the film the first time, it just knocked me back in my chair because there was a shot where the camera rounds the corner into my bedroom, played by Shanley Caswell, and she's standing in the bedroom. And when the camera rounds the corner, there's a picture up on the mantel board of it's a folk art drawing of a white cat sitting on a calico pillow. And I was like, oh my God, that exact picture is hanging in my office. And
right.
My mother's friend Fran had given it to me for my 13th birthday because
the black
we
velvet
went out.
picture. The black velvet picture. Yeah. Okay, I know.
Yep. And
Fun.
It's just a white cat. And I fell in love with it, and it was only 50 cents, and my mom didn't have 50 cents on her to buy it at a flea market. And so Fran bought it for me and gave it to me for my 13th birthday. And I've had it with me ever since. And so to see that identical picture in the movie when nobody involved with that film had any idea that I was in possession of it, that I had received it when we lived at the farm, and that it has been one of my prized possessions my whole life. They did not know that. Neither did they know, because they never saw any inside photographs of the farmhouse. They weren't using the real farmhouse. They were using a set in North Carolina. So they had to choose period wallpaper, and they chose the exact print of wallpaper that we had in the house, and they did not know that it had been that one. So there were cosmic forces at work in terms of making The Conjuring, which I will never understand but always be grateful for. They were like the little cosmic kisses that said, no matter what, this is okay.
That you were on the right track.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but, had it not been for The Conjuring, our true family story would be languishing in obscurity like so many other books because it didn't have a major motion picture behind it. So
yeah.
That movie had a lot to do with how many people have read the true story.
Yeah. It helped bring it to light.
It did.
And sort of shone the spotlight on it.
Yeah.
Play devil's advocate, though, this could also be the spirit or the entity's way of gaining energy by getting all of this attention.
Well, that could be. I try not to think in terms of anything being that malevolent. There was an awful lot of spiritual love in that house, too. And there was a lot of benevolent spirit activity in the house. It wasn't all doom and gloom, not by a long shot. There was a great deal of light, which is how it got the title House of Darkness, House of Light.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
It was both.
Yeah.
It was both. We live in duality. We live in a realm where good and evil exist simultaneously. And the dark backdrop is what causes us to be able to see the light. If everything was, virtually one-dimensional, we would never ever be able to distinguish from the two.
Right.
And so because that is the nature of our existence in this realm, then I think that we need to acknowledge that both exist, but that one is ultimately stronger than the other, because good conquers evil and love conquers fear every single time, or none of us would be here to be talking about this.
Yeah. It's the human condition and the spiritual condition, good versus evil.
Yeah. Yeah. And I spend a great deal of time in the fifth dimension. I'm not really comfortable in the 3D realm. It's very oppressive. It's burdensome. It's, filled with a lot of sadness and grief and loss, and I'm really not comfortable here. And there's a real part of me that thinks, like, I don't belong here. Why am I here? Why was I sent here? What's this? And so over the decades, I have spent an inordinate amount of my life studying, researching, connecting with, and making conscious contact with extraterrestrials. And I believe that what paved the runway for that was living in that farmhouse as a child and being open and exposed to the fourth dimension, which cracked wide open my third eye, and allows me to interact and interrelate with any number of different entities and beings in numerous dimensions. And I'm grateful for it. It makes life a little convoluted and kind of loud and noisy sometimes, but I really wouldn't have it any other way. And it gives me a really great place to escape when, horrible things happen here, and I just have to get off planet for a little while.
So do you do that? Do you do that meditation? Is that how
I do it by desire.
Is it like
it doesn't require meditation for me. I live in pretty much a constant state of meditation.
So almost like an astral projection or some kind of...
Yeah. Or as I like to say, I'm out of here. You fear-based carbon units can all destroy yourselves if you want to. I'm the freaking out of here now. I love my life, and I appreciate so many elements of Earthlings and Earth itself, but the fact is we're destroying this planet at an absolutely record rate, and we seem hell-bent and determined to destroy each other and everything that lives on this planet. And it makes me so sick, and it makes me so burdened with knowledge that there are times that I just have to fly away, and I do.
Yeah, it's scary and depressing for sure when you think about it. This is the rise of the sacred feminine energy. And I think that we have all, in the last few years, seen that is in the midst of occurring. We have left the Piscean age. We are in the initial stages of coming to terms with living in the age of Aquarius, which is the ascended age, which is the time when women basically rise to the occasion and stomp out what is evil on this planet. And so, everything that's happening geopolitically is all happening for a reason. All of it is happening for a reason. It is humanity's great wake-up call. It is the paradigm shift. We're in the midst of it, and the time is now. Yeah, and I have hope that all of this is going to happen, which I think is what keeps me going and keeps me from getting depressed about the state of the world, is because I think that there is going to be a change. And I don't know whether, I don't know whether it's going to be environmental, because, I've read
it's going to be everything,
right? Because I read that the Earth is going to shift on its axis and things are going to change. I don't know whether it's going to be finally we're going to get contact from extraterrestrials, because how can we be the only life form on this planet? I mean,
well, there are millions of me,
right?
all over this planet, millions of me. that have contact on a day-to-day basis with extraterrestrials.
And so, I mean, something's going to happen. It's not going to stay the way it is. I don't think the world's ever. And I've read a lot about aliens, and I've listened. There's a Canadian government. Used to be a government official named Paul Hellyer, and he has a podcast.
I know him.
Okay,
yeah,
so you know him.
He's a lovely person.
Canadian, wasn't he a minister of something? Canada? Sorry, Paul.
He is the former defense minister.
Former defense
minister. Former defense minister of Canada, and he has spilled his guts.
Right, and he's and because he's Canadian, obviously I've listened to him, and I think there's going to be a huge change. I think there already would have been. And, I've read about aliens, and aliens know what humans are up to. And I read that they're alarmed that we've discovered nuclear power and what we've done with it. And I think for people are going to be where they need to be, where they're supposed to be. And I think the people that are open are the people that are going to experience it. The people that, won't look at it as an option, won't look at it as something that is going on, something that is real. I don't know what's going to happen with them, because if you refuse to believe something, then I don't know how they're going to be.
It's really not a matter of, do you believe that there are clouds in the sky? Do you believe that, water is blue? Do you believe that there is grass underneath your feet? It all really falls into the same category. You can deny the existence. I don't call them aliens because they are no more alien to this planet than we are. And in fact, have probably been engaged with this planet long before we existed. I think that the reason why there's such a wide variety of different kinds of people in the one human race is because that we are hybrids, that we are part them, they are part us. And as Paul Hellyer once divinely said, the galactic family has looked down upon us when we started experimenting with nuclear power and said, oh no, the children are playing with matches. Yeah. And that's when they came from. If they could get here, they came from every corner of the universe to oversee this critical period of time in the course of human development. They care about us. They love us. And it doesn't mean that of all the 57 documented races that have visited this planet or who are currently cohabitating it with us, that all of them have the very best intentions for us. But most of them do. Most of them are humanoid, and they are very much about our success. Our success translates into their success.
Can you tell us how you communicate with the extraterrestrials?
Yes, I talk to them. I sing to them, and I take thousands and thousands of people out into the evening or in broad daylight. I have the vast majority of my sightings in broad daylight. But I take people out wherever I go, wherever I am. If they want to go, I give them a formal introduction to the galactic family and show them exactly how to connect, exactly what that process is. And I am in the final stages of proofing the interior file of my latest book, which is called A Wonder to Behold, Guideposts to Engagement with Intergalactic engagement with humanity. Guideposts to, I don't know, it's got a subtitle longer than my arm. They told me to give it to it. I don't know. They told me to write it, and they told me what the subtitle was, and I can't even remember it for a freaking radio show. So, shame on me. Guideposts to Intergalactic Engagement with Humanity. That's the subtitle of the book. The title is A Wonder to Behold.
Okay. Is it an instruction manual of sorts?
It is, in a way. It's also my paranormal memoir, detailing not only the integration and correlation which occurred when I was 12 years old at the farm, which is when I had my first sighting, my first conscious recollection of a sighting of the galactic family, but it also is I think, a beautiful tribute to my family and especially to my sister April. It is a treatise on life and death and afterlife, and it is literally a Venn diagram of how to connect intergalactically with other entities successfully.
Wow.
I'm looking forward to that. Do you have an idea?
Well, yeah, it's almost 500 pages. Sorry about that. Apparently, I can't really write anything less than that.
I was going to say you have a knack for writing about big books.
Yeah, I do. But yeah, it should be out in a couple of weeks.
Oh, excellent. And people can get it on Amazon and brick-and-mortar bookstores?
Yeah, it'll be available everywhere. But it'll take a couple of weeks longer to get it all formatted into all the different e-readers, but it will be available in hardcover, softbound, and anybody that wants to know what's going on with it, just follow me on Facebook. I have like a bajillion pages on Facebook. I'm really easy to find. Not only my personal page, but my fan page is called the Buttercup Brigade. We're the good deed doers, rose-colored glasses wearers, the sapsuckers that take in every stray animal, that's us. And because really somebody's got to do it, so you just put sucker in neon on your forehead, and all the stray animals seem to know exactly where to come for a good square meal and a nice warm bed. And so that's that. And then I also have a book page, A Wonder to Behold. I have a book page, House of Darkness, House of Light, and also for the aficionados of Jack the Ripper out there, I co-authored a very compelling book with George Lopez, and I give him all the credit because it was his idea. I would never have come up with it in like a bajillion years, but I took his idea and turned it into a novel. And we've already just finished the screenplay. We've got an excellent screenwriter who converted it to a screenplay, and it's being shopped around Hollywood right now. And I'm also in the process of...
Is that one in a Flickr?
Yeah, in a Flickr.
Okay.
And, it's a really compelling story. It really is amazing. It's also very dark and very gruesome, of course, based on the subject matter. But it's also a very fascinating retelling of it. And, I think that sometimes you need to stare into the depths of the darkest pool to see the light. And I when I wrote the dedication to it, it was to the women of history who made history. Because, those women, his 5 victims, were victimized twice. Not only did he carve them up like a butcher, but then they were lost to the annals of history. Everybody knows who Jack the Ripper is, but very few people know the names of his victims. Yeah. And when you're done reading that book, you'll feel like you know each one of them intimately well.
I'm going to order that book. I went on a Jack the Ripper tour when I was in London in 2017. So I went all around to all those places and got to see where it happened. And was happy to say that most of the stories were about the women.
Good.
Not so much him. So there are some places you can go to learn about the women. But I'm definitely going to order that book.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to order your new book, too, because that sounds really interesting. And I'd like to hear more about that after the show if you have a couple minutes.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I'd like to do that. And
well, I'm also in the process of working on the screenplays for my books, my trilogy. And we're well underway with that. Hopefully we'll be shooting by the end of this year or the beginning of next year. We're just getting our financing. I mean, it's, a big deal. It's like it takes a few minutes to come up with $30-40 million to make a series of films. But we're well underway in the process, and all is going well. So, this is an opportunity, the first time in history, for basically the quote-unquote same story to be told from 2 entirely different perspectives, the people who investigated it and then the people who lived it.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that that you're making a movie based on House of Darkness, House of Light. But
three movies.
Well, yes. But I was going to ask what it was like for you and your family to have a film made about you, and I was referencing The Conjuring, but now I can reference House of Darkness, House of Light as well. I mean, what is that like to put yourself out there on the big screen?
It's very weird. It really is weird. You know, and we were lucky, fortunate enough to have met everybody that worked on the film. You know, all of our counterparts, the young ladies that played us, they're just sweetness and light, all of them. It was a really remarkable experience to be kind of sucked into Hollywood the way that we were, not only out there, but on the set in North Carolina to have been an integral part of that. I mean, they were literally rewriting the script as they were making the film and talking with us, you know, so there were elements of that film that happened specifically because of conversations that we had with them on the set while they were shooting the movie.
Were you?
It's strange. I mean, no, I wasn't there, but one day. That's all that I wanted to be there. As far as I was concerned, this was their thing to do. I was very, very busy. They were running me all over the country, kind of promoting the film because there were so many incidents that did occur on the set and with the cast and crew that a lot of the members of the cast kind of reneged on their obligation to promote the films because they were frightened. So I don't tell their stories for them. It's up to them to tell their own stories. But I will tell you the one that got the most public notice was the night after we left the set. There was a spontaneous fire that occurred in the hotel where the entire cast and crew was staying. And at 2:00 in the morning, they were all outside in their jammies in the parking lot waiting for the fire department to find the fire and put it out. They couldn't find it. Wow. And as you know, having read the books, fire was an integral part of that story. You know, how spirits can terrify you with fire.
Yeah.
And it was, it was really intense, and it was all over the news, and it happened after we were there. You know, our whole family came together, and then all hell broke loose on that set.
And at the hotel.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yep, and we didn't do it. We were long gone. We were all the way back. We were back in Atlanta by that time, trying to, you know, hoping and praying that our mother was going to survive a broken hip. It was awful. It was a very tumultuous time in our lives. I was living out of suitcases, living in strange hotels, living at 30,000 feet. I was all over this country. I saw The Conjuring 9 times in 9 days. You know, just at one premiere after another. They flew me right from Hollywood to Michigan, from Michigan to Rhode Island, from Rhode Island to Florida, and I think there were a couple of stops in between. I mean, it was insane.
Yeah,
it's like a blur to me now.
But it probably was then, too. I mean, it's like you're just nonstop, boom, boom, boom.
Yeah. And apparently they didn't seem to understand how old I was and how old I am because it knocked the stuffing out of me. The Scarecrow and Wizard of Oz had nothing on me.
Oh, no.
I don't know how I got through it. I don't know what well I had to dig deep down into with my bucket.
That's what you did. You just picked up that hay and shoved it right back in and got back on the next plane.
Yep, I did. It was crazy. I mean, it really is like a blur to me. It really is. I mean, I was on press junkets with Joey King, who played my sister Christine in the movie. Yeah, I do remember this very specifically because she was absolutely delightful. And we ended up doing a press junket down in Miami. And we were only there, I think, for maybe 18 or 20 hours. But in that amount of time between television and radio, we spoke to about 60 million people. And while we were having a lunch break, she got on the phone on a conference call with the other girls in the cast. And she's like, I'm with Andrea and you are not. I'm with Andrea and you are not. I mean, and they're like, okay, put her on the phone. No, she's busy. She's eating. You know, I mean, she just tormented the poor things. And when my sister April died, I heard from every single one of them, you know, and the producers and, you know, people that were associated with the film that remembered meeting April and expressed their deepest condolences. And I will always be appreciative of that. But those 5 girls formed a sisterhood and a bond while they made that movie that will persist lifelong.
I mean, maybe that was something that was supposed to come out of, you know, the darkness as well. Some of the light that came out of the darkness.
I agree.
So many lives connected, from all this.
Yeah.
Brought so many people together in good ways and scary ways, and what a story! What a story to have lived.
Yeah, I think that the thing that's most important about the story is that not only does it touch hearts and open minds, but it liberates people from fear to tell their own interactions, their own stories. Because if we had the courage to tell ours, then they feel emboldened to tell their own. And I think that's the most important element of, you know, bringing it to light, as it were.
Well, I am literally pulling off my Harry Potter hat to you for sharing your story with us today, because you would have to relive it every time you told it, and that's brave, because it can't be easy doing that. So we thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Now, Andrea, do you have any events that you're going to be speaking at coming up that you'd like to promote? I know you touched on A Wonder to Behold, the book that's coming out in a month, with the super duper long subtitle.
Yeah.
But do you have any appearances at any Paracons or anything that's coming up?
I'm going to be in Bellevue, Ohio at the Bel Air House in mid-May. People can find out Kristen Lee's event. I'm going to be in Vail, Colorado for a really spiritual, wonderful event, which I can't remember the name of right now, but it'll be posted on my wall. So find me on Facebook. It is the official home of the Paranormal. So just find me there and you'll see it. In July, I'm doing the Ocean State Paracon, which is in Harrisville, Rhode Island, in my own hometown. It's always a very big event. People come in from all over the country for it. It's only a few miles away from the farm. It's fabulous. And in August, my family, my 3 living sisters and my father and I are going to be speaking together at the Upper Peninsula, Michigan Paracon in Sault Ste. Marie, which is one of the biggest Paracons in the entire country. It's a wonderful event. I do it every year. I'm so grateful to be invited back year after year. But this year we were able to pull together the logistics. And even though my mother does not travel anymore, we'll have her on the phone while it's all going on. And people can even ask her questions through us on the phone. We're going to film it. So that'll be an exciting thing. It'll be the first and only time that my family has all been together since the interview that we did on The Conjuring. Only this time my mother is not going to be left alone to her own devices in our absence. And one of our very dear friends is going to come and spend the weekend with her while we're all away. Because it is also the weekend of her 80th birthday, and none of us are going to be there to celebrate it with her, but we will all be with her as soon as we get home. As soon as I fly back to Florida, I'm unpacking, I'm repacking, and I'm heading for Georgia.
Excellent. That sounds like a fantastic event, and you'll have her on the phone, you know.
Yep, we'll have her on the phone, and she can hear 1,500 people sing happy birthday to her, which not everybody can claim.
Right.
And so that will be excellent. And then from like August on, it's a blur. I have so many different events that I'll be doing. I'll be in Michigan for like 3 weeks. I'll be in Wisconsin. I'll be in Nevada. I'll be in California. I don't even know all the places that I'm going to be, but, you know, I really should, like, you know, put an itinerary together and post it, but I'm too busy editing, and, you know, I'm all done with the editing. I'm just proofing the final interior file on the book right now, and that alone is a very tedious process, line by line, word by word, making sure there are no typographical errors, there are no grammatical errors, that it is just perfect, because that's what my readers expect and deserve. And so I'm getting close to the end of that project, and I will make a big splash. I mean, this was supposed to be out in December of last year. And there were a series of reasons why it's not, including, you know, the production element. It's already taken 3 times longer to produce the book than it took to write it and edit it. So, it's just a process, and it's going to come out when it comes out. And I thank everybody for their patience. I promise you it will be worth the wait.
It sounds awesome. And you know, after August, we're rolling into Halloween season. So supernaturally, you're going to be extremely busy during those few months. And that's expected. And, you know, I'm really glad that we finally were able to get connected. Like we said, you know, at the beginning of the interview, we've tried to get this interview kicked off. I don't know if this is our 4th attempt now. So finally, the gods have shined upon us and allowed us to have this conversation. And I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be on ParaDivas. It's been a real honor. Oh, it's always a pleasure to speak with you.
Well, it's my pleasure and my privilege to join you. I very much appreciate the work that you're doing in the field, and your outreach and your investigations, and how seriously you take this. You know, far too many people, you know, it's kind of like we went from one end of the pendulum swung to the other side. You know, it's like we went from nobody even wanted to talk about this. This was a totally taboo subject 40 years ago when we moved to the farm, to everybody's talking about it. But everybody thinks that, you know, they're a quote-unquote ghost hunter after watching 3 episodes of a paranormal series and declaring themselves the world's leading experts before the ink is dry on their black T-shirts. And, you know, so we've got to find some middle ground, some stability. People need to understand that this is real, that it can be dangerous, that if you don't know what you're doing, and if you know there are no experts in this field, absolutely none. There are no experts in the paranormal on this planet. No such thing. And, you know, if my family doesn't know, nobody does. So, you know, I don't want to burst anybody's bubbles, but all we can do is share and learn and share and learn and grow and spiritually evolve. And that's why we're here.
Exactly. Now, Karai, the new co-host of ParaDivas, she suggested, and this is going to be something that we do every show going forward. At the end of every show, I'm going to say a prayer of protection for our guest, ourselves, and all of our listeners. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. Amen. And that is to keep us all safe, because, like Andrea said, this is a serious. It's a serious topic. It's a serious thing that we're dealing with here, and too many people take it way too lightly, and they're treading in dangerous waters. So. I thank you, Karai, for doing an excellent job on your first.
Thanks, Marie.
Yes.
Thank you
for your maiden voyage, honey. You just right at the helm. There you go.
She nailed it, didn't she?
She nailed it.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you all for tuning in. And until the next episode, stay scared.
Movie. You know, the one with the guy in the white mask who walks around and stalks babysitters?
You're listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network, the best in paranormal talk radio in the UK and around the world.
Did you ever turn to your radio for your favorite talk show to find that it's been preempted for this?
In the air, to deep right center. Back goes Lewis to the wall, and it's out of here!
Or this?
And I'm ashamed of you, Hillary, for voting for it.
Do you have a favorite talk radio program that's not available in your city? Just go to TalkStreamLive.com for links to the best streaming talk radio shows. At TalkStream Live, you will find live talk shows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All your favorites are here. With such a large selection, you will also discover some new favorites. On the go and still want to listen? With a mobile smartphone, simply type TalkStream Live on your internet browser. Now you can take internet radio with you. You will also find news and sports streams. Best of all, the TalkStream Live directory is free and there's never a login required. Remember TalkStreamLive.com, the fastest route between you and your favorite talk radio show.
Are you experiencing the strange and paranormal in your home or business? Do you feel that unseen forces are at work around you? Are you looking for answers? Spirit Rescue International is here to help. Spirit Rescue International is a non-profit organization that is dedicated to helping people around the world with their paranormal issues. Our trained team of experienced scientific researchers, psychics, and remote viewers work together to find the root cause of your issue and help find the best solution for our clients. Spirit Rescue International specializes in spirit rescue, helping those lost souls in need to cross over to the other side, as well as clearing negative phenomenon or explaining benign natural forces to ease the minds of our clients. Our team examines all aspects of each individual case discreetly and free of charge. For more information about Spirit Rescue International and our services, please visit our website at www.spiritrescueint.com. That's spiritrescueint.com.
Have you ever wanted to visit the south of Italy? Amalfi, Ravello, Positano, Sorrento, places of immense beauty on the Amalfitana coast. Nearby Vesuvius stands proud against the sky, shadowing the ancient Roman ruins of Pompeii. In the midst of all this beauty lies the picturesque hillside village of Pontoni that dates back to the Middle Ages. Stay in Pontoni, in the self-catering apartments of Il Petrale, the beautiful casa belonging to Carmiana Respoli, who will warmly welcome you when you arrive. Il Petrale, a haven of peace in the heart of this magnificent place called Pontoni. For more information, email us at carminerispoli@email.it. That's Carmine Rispoli, CarmineRispoli @email.it.
Have you ever seen an alien? Have you ever witnessed Bigfoot or other strange creatures? Have you ever seen a ghost, angel, or other otherworldly beings? Then we want your stories. Paranormal UK Radio Network is looking for people with real-life encounters with the strange and unusual for an upcoming book series. Please visit our website at paranormalukradionetwork.com and click on the link in the menu for Collecting Stories, Strange Encounters, and tell us all about your strange encounters with the unknown. All submissions will be reviewed, and those selected will be appearing in a future publication. Strange Encounters with the Unknown. We want your stories.
Hi, this here is Maynard from down south in Tennessee, and my family came to this country on the Mayflower, so I embraced my British roots by listening to the Paranormal UK radio network. Boy, howdy, now I gotta go get me some pork rinds.
Well, I read through that handbook for the recently deceased. It says, live people ignore the strange and unusual. I myself am strange and unusual.
Coming to you on the Paranormal UK Radio Network.